Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Mendes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and so we're back to the Lindsay Davis, Marcus Didius Falco books, Three Hands in the Fountain. And in this one, aside from the fact that Falco and Helena are desperately trying to get used to being new parents, to, raising their daughter in surroundings that Helena probably nonetheless considers to be squalid, given that she is a patrician and he is really, really not. On top of this, his best friend Petronius has decided to cheat on his wife with a dead gangster's daughter. Because this is the thing, is these books, this stands alone. If you read this without reading any of the other books, it would stand alone. You could absolutely read it. But just a couple of books back, Petronius had been the one who captured and arrested and had effectively caused the exile of Milvia's father. Milvia being the person that Petronius has decided to have an affair with. And there was a whole thing, and the guy sneaked back into Rome instead of actually letting himself be exiled, and had been planning to keep on being a criminal, keep on being, a mafia boss. And anyways, things happened and he died. Petronius, however, has decided to have an affair with his daughter. And the problem is, of course, that her mother is just as deeply involved in running the mafia as her husband was, and Milvia's husband has decided to try to, take his steps into joining the crime family. And so it seems like a bad idea, especially given that Petronius is devoted to the daughters that he had with his wife Sylvia. And, and Sylvia is not an unattractive person. But Petronius nonetheless cheated on her, and she found out and couldn't take it and threw him out of the house, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so Petronius has moved into Falco's old apartment across the street from Falco and Helena's new apartment, because he needed a place to crash when his wife kicked him out, and had decided that he was going to try being a PI along with Falco, except the problem is that he is a cop. That what they do, whatever you call his particular branch of his particular branch of law enforcement, whatever they're called, Petronius is basically a cop trying to be a PI, except he's a cop who didn't leave because he wanted to have the freedom to investigate when and how he wanted, or those other things that are reasons why cops become private investigators. No, Petronius is a police officer who has been suspended because he is sleeping with the daughter of a dead gangster, and because, with a dead gangster whose mother is deeply involved in crime and whose husband is getting involved in crime, and he's doing a morally problematic thing by cheating on his wife, and then has doubled down on the morally problematic things by doing it with a gangster's daughter. And so they've basically suspended him for, moral turpitude or something to that effect. And so the problem is that he tries to approach being an informer, being a PI, the way you would being a cop. Except the problem is that when you're a police officer, you have the force of the law behind you. You have the force of, if I hit you with my billy club, who are you going to call? The police? There are things you can do as a police officer, whether they are moral or ethical or not. The point is, there are things you can do as a police officer that you can't do as a private investigator. That's the thing about being a private investigator, is you do not have any force of law behind you. All you have is the force of your hopefully considerable intellect. And if you don't have that, then you might have a problem. And so Falco spends a significant portion of this book talking about, or at least a decent section of this book talking about, Petronius trying very hard and, to approach things systematically in the way that the Vigilus do, but he's not with the Vigilus, or Vigilus, whichever you prefer. He's not with them. He's an informer now, or at least for the moment. And the thing about an informer is you can't do that. You have to sidle up to people. You have to collect gossip from neighbors who are willing to talk to you. You have to be clever and get information out of people sideways, because you cannot say, I am here with the force of the law behind me and I will hit you with my billy club, and it doesn't matter because you can't, go to anybody to go past me because I am a cop. And, yeah, okay, there are those police officers who actually are moral people, but even then you still, even if you are wholly moral and do not use, throw your weight around, you still have the weight to throw around of, I am an official person employed by the government to do this job, and I have resources I can, go back to if you turn me down. I can get warrants for your arrest. I can get other people to come in who have more authority than I do to demand that you hand over evidence and so on. But an informer can't do that, and so Petronius spends much of this book hamstrung by it, but also complaining bitterly because, of course, Falco is entirely unsystematic. Now, he's unsystematic because he can't afford to be systematic. He doesn't have the resources to be systematic, and on top of which, he basically just has to find a lead and follow that lead. He cannot say, I am going to interview every single human being in Rome who might know something, because there is only one of him. So there's that, which is an ongoing theme throughout the book, and actually winds up in its own strange way playing into the plot line, which, is nice. It's nice that Petronius cheating on his wife leads to Milvia showing up because she's concerned that her mother has been kidnapped because there is a serial killer, as this title suggests. Now, it says a serial killer stalks the games. It's one of the most interesting things about this, and I don't doubt that Lindsay Davis was entirely factual when this book indicates that there are Roman games constantly. Now, the thing about Roman games is they're not all gladiatorial contests. There are, chariot races and all kinds of other things that involve crashes and blood. Because, what are sports for if not for crashes and blood? Why do people watch rugby and football if not for that? Pardon me, American football. If not for the violence. But anyways, the point is that there are a lot of games, and Rome is just one city, and yet there's this constant unending rounds of games, and it feels like a lot until you consider the perspective that a major city will have a football team and a basketball team and a baseball team, and a hockey team, and sometimes also a soccer team, and if you're in other countries, you'll have a cricket team, and a soccer/football team, and a rugby team, and, people will also go see tennis games, and lacrosse, and, all kinds of other sports that aren't, the really, really big moneymaker ones, and this is a year-round thing, and so it's not actually shocking when you think about it that there are games, but it feels like, there's just constant events, these unending events. And it's actually interesting because the way Rome is described in this, it's a large metropolitan city. It feels like, any big city like New York or Chicago or what have you, London. But at the same time, these ritualistic celebrations feel constant in these books, that there's this oddly constant backdrop of massive social, religious, cultural events celebrating religious figures and historical figures and emperors and things. And the omnipresence of the Roman games in this book is not to be understated. Now, the serial killer, as far as this book goes, basically he comes into Rome and will murder a woman every Roman game, every set of games. He comes into the city and he murders them and chops them up and basically throws them into various watercourses and also some of the aqueducts around the city, meaning that people have started finding broken down and destroyed and half-rotted body parts in the water. That basically, it's mostly that he's been doing it enough that these are starting to build up. Although what's really interesting, of course, is the moment that Falco stumbles across a clue from one of his much maligned brothers-in-law, who works on the river and says, oh yeah, we pull up, women's torsos, like, all the time. Every major game, there's another woman's torso in the river, and, Falco sort of has this subtext of, you've been pulling these up for literally years, every time there's a major Roman game, and you've said nothing? Jesus, man. But anyway, so he follows this down. Another important figure in this is an ex-consul who is apparently set to wind up being the new governor of Britain, which, by the end of the book, Falco is somewhat regretful that somebody who was this competent and could make that good a partner as an informer is going to be wasted on governing Britain, because he appears to be one of the few patricians that Falco can appreciate as being somebody who actually seems like a practical, useful member of society instead of somebody frittering away his time on incredible wastes of time, the way so many wealthy people do, as far as Falco is concerned. Anyways, so the book is filled with that, and, them tracking this down and figuring it out, and Petronius getting beaten up, and because Milvia's mother decided that she didn't want a police officer having an affair with her daughter, and, it's a whole big thing. And also, Falco and Helena are trying to get used to being new parents, because, of course, in the book just before this, Helena had followed Falco all the way out to Spain while pregnant and had given birth while traveling back from Spain. And so this book is basically a lot of the pair of them dealing with the fact that they're new parents, with Falco dealing with a mistake that one hopes not many parents have made, but it is a mistake that I'm sure some do, which is the baby is new, and you're not used to needing to worry about the baby, and so while you're caring for the baby, something comes up and you dash off because something important came up and you forgot you had a baby, because the baby is just a brand new thing. And this happens once in this book, that Falco goes racing home having realized that he has followed up on a lead that suddenly came across his path, and completely forgotten that the baby was left home alone, all by her lonesome. And he comes back to Helena, who is less than impressed with his parenting skills, since, their daughter is literally, a month or two old, and he ran off and left her alone in the house. Which is really not the best thing to do for a newborn baby. But, little baby Julia manages to survive, and they capture the serial killer, and Helena's youngest brother elopes with the girl who was supposed to marry her, the older of the two brothers, and that's probably coming up in the next book. Anyway, so that's everything, and I will see you all next week.